Greetings and salutations, welcome to Teh Comix, a production of Fanfare Industries. I'm your host, Micah R. Maloney, one of Fanfare Industries' founders, as well as founder of Red Rock Gaming and co-founder of First Taste Multimedia. More about those and other videos coming soon enough. Let's dive into today's video, shall we? The term sequential art was first coined in 1985 by comics artist Will Eisner in his books Comics and Sequential Art. In the book, Eisner analyzed sequential art into four elements: design, drawing, caricature, and writing. We'll discuss these and other terms tied to sequential art in later videos, but it is important to bring that up before discussing the broad strokes history of sequential art, since many don't know what sequential art even is in the first place. Sequential art may be many things to many different people, but most view it as comic strips, comic books, graphic novels, and webcomics. Though technically the frames of a movie are essentially a really slow form of sequential art, as mentioned by Scott MacLeod. More on him in later videos as well. But with that in mind, sequential art started before the term was created, right? Back in the 30s or so, before Superman even existed. Well, yes. It existed before the term to define it existed, but also before the 1933 first modern comic book, Famous Funnies, which reprinted earlier newspaper humor comic strips. Even before the first political cartoon in 1794. No, we have to go back to the past. In fact, before Common Era. The earliest form of sequential art predates written language. It was found in a cave wall in Lascaux, France. These illustrations were cave paintings depicting a tribe hunting for food in 170th century BC. The next form of sequential art advancement would be the invention of language, and later the depictions of Egyptian rulers in 1300 BC, found from the tomb of Nefertari, who was part of the 19th dynasty of Egypt. There are plentiful depictions in Egypt that came later, as well as many in East Asia in the intervening centuries, though sequential art came later in East Asia, despite some examples of earlier cultural art in the region. The next medium jump was to 3 dimensions, with Greek and Roman rulers immortalized in carved marble stories, like from the outer walls of the Parthenon in Athens, Greece, back in 400 BC. We see sculpted stories continue for quite some time, as well as paint coloring them. In fact, the Colosseum in Rome may have lost all of its paint over the centuries, but descriptions of it say it was brightly colored all over, including on the seats, with some frescoes on the assorted walls. We also see the first known examples of ancient graffiti there. Speaking of frescoes, the paintings done by the artist Michelangelo in 1511 AD are currently the largest sequential art story created within the Sistine Chapel. The next jump goes to 1745 with Marriage à la Mode by William Hogarth, often credited as the first modern illustration by an artist who influenced the next leap in sequential art, early cartoonists such as George Cruikshank. Generally accepted as the first comic strip, The Yellow Kid was created by Richard Felton Outcault in 1895. It in turn started the early comic strip in comic book history in North America, leading onward toward the creation of Superman by artist Joe Shuster and writer Jerry Siegel. While not the first superhero character, nor the first comic book, Action Comics #1 in 1938 is one of the most well-known pieces of sequential art in popular culture, and signaled the start of the golden age of comics, which would last until 1955 with the introduction of the Comics Code Authority, which created vast ripples in the industry that still has influence to this day. The Silver Age, in turn, would last from 1956 to 1970, and it would introduce one of the other big superhero figures. In 1962, a radioactive spider would bite a high school nerd named Peter Parker, and with it, the superhero was humanized far more significantly. Between the pages of Batman, Superman, and Spider-Man comic books, most fans of sequential art found their first true introduction to the art form and industry. And pop culture pins much of the history and significance of these three characters to the history and significance of the art form itself, despite its much broader scope. While comics in the Golden Age were mostly about heroes and heroines being far more powerful than their villains, the Silver Age largely dealt with issues that they would face beyond mere combat. The mundane and complicated side of having an alternate identity, as well as goofy and lighthearted plots in less serious comic books. The Bronze Age, running from 1970 to 1985, however, was far more mature. Certainly more violent, more alluring illustratively, but the industry also started publishing more complex characterization and plot, which rippled through not only the big publishers, but also new ones that sprung up, not to replace those that disappeared during the waning years of the Golden Age, but new ones that would tell new stories. Many in the underground scene, known as Comix with an X at the end instead of a CS. In fact, this series is called Teh Comix as a nod to that and to the digital age. After the Bronze Age, sequential art moved on to the Modern Age, where it still remains, lasting many decades longer than any other age of comics, in part due to less clear shifts in the comic book industry. Yes, technology has made more innovations, allowed many more small publishers to pop up and release their work to the general public, allowed creators to put out their work online as webcomics or digital downloads. But the modern age has also spread itself out into so many different genres and types of stories that nothing has stood out significantly enough to become a clear boundary between its different years and a newer age of sequential art yet to come. Who knows? Perhaps there is a shift yet coming, perhaps one that you or I or some other unknown may instigate. For now, however, we end our broad strokes history of sequential art, that we may focus on other aspects of creation of the art form, its marketing, its more nuanced history in different regards, biograph certain creators, and discuss other subjects about sequential art in general. We bid you adieu, and we'll catch you on the flip side.